Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of the Happy Poly Day series. Today I am joined by Jhen from Monogamy Pod. And yeah, today we're going to be talking about the polyamorous POC experience.
Hi, Jen. I'm host of Monogamy Pod, which is, of course, a podcast about non-monogamy and polyamory through a Black Caribbean lens. Huge mouthful just to say I'm Jamaican. I was born and raised in Jamaica and discovered polyamory while in Jamaica. Very awkward situation, by the way. And so now it's just like I want to highlight BIPOC experiences in polyamory because when I was doing my research and a lot of that stuff, it was just very white. Everything was very white, very American. And they're like, okay, but no one's really understanding where I'm coming from here. So my friend Shem and I started this podcast, and now it's just me rambling about my life and other people's lives. Pretty much. That's what I do here. But my origin story is that, fun fact, I'm pansexual, but I discovered that I was into women when I was like 6 or 7 years old. So pretty young, not really sure, how to navigate that because I didn't think people did those sorts of things. Like I knew about lesbians because Ellen, Ellen's a lesbian. Everyone knew that. But, I didn't know that you could like both. But it was my dream, like as a kid, to have a husband and a wife because it just made the most sense. I was like, why isn't anyone doing this? Y'all are stupid. Lame. Like everyone knows this is where it's at. Like boys are okay and all because they can like find things, but like girls are better because we can do stuff.
They can find things. That's the only purpose.
As a 6 or 7 year old, like what is their purpose? Like honestly, what do boys do for you at that age?
That
Aside
is true.
from like run around and make noise and just smell. So my journey into understanding my sexuality, which I finally officially accepted, was a thing when I was like 13. Because of course it's like, this is not a thing. And then L word happened and I was like, oh, that lady's bi. Okay, I can do that. I know a word for this now. And so doing that, living my life, still wanting a husband and a wife, because that was the ideal. That was the only way that I thought relationships worked. Either you were cheating on your partner and you had multiple other like outside people. In Jamaica, we call those like, of course, side pieces. Everyone knows that phrase. But you have like a Joe Grind, which is like a male version of that. He's Joe Grind. Yeah, we have different. Patois is very expressive. Okay. Right. A Jim Screechy or a Joe Grind. He's that, outside man to your primary romantic relationship.
Okay.
And it is also very much accepted, but not accepted that your partner will cheat on you. And so he'll have a side woman.
Oh my God.
Or you'll have a quote unquote matey. That's what we call them. Mateys. See, very, very interesting. And so there's even a song that was very popular back in the late 90s, I believe, called "I Love My Mate." Like I love my boyfriend's girlfriend, sort of thing. And so it's very interesting how this is kind of like indoctrinated in the culture. Like we're a very Christian society as well. So fornication, horrible. Masturbation, terrible. Harry Potter, of the devil. If your husband has a girlfriend, well, you should just get over it because that's what men do.
Oh, wow. And this is so specifically like, only men could do this. Only men could have.
Yes. Yeah. If women do this, it is the end of the world, obviously, because, how dare a woman want another man? Don't you know that if she has too many men in her vagina, it will just expand and it will never go back to its normal size? Like, who would want that?
Yeah. Like it's okay, right. Yeah, this actually kind of reminds me of kind of the culture like back in Hong Kong or like, China, like where I come from, right? Like I know that in China, it's basically kind of like similar in that like, if you're like a high flying businessman, it's very much expected that like you will have a mistress. And usually, like someone that you'll like lavish quite a lot of gifts on. Like it's basically going to be kind of like a sugar daddy, sugar baby dynamic type thing.
Yeah.
And like the thing about that is like it's fine if you do it as long as like they're not like publicly recognized. And wives will usually like look the other way as long as like they still maintain like the hierarchy of being like number one. And like such women like like the kind of mistress, they're called 小三, which is like, it means little three or like little third. And so
not a normal third, but like a tiny third. Like
yeah,
you're not like a real
like
member of this marriage.
yeah,
like yeah,
yeah,
got you.
Yeah, very, yeah. And so like so that's like very, you know, like socially accepted, and so, which is, you know, and so it's interesting that like they'll allow that, like as long as it's like, but I'm still, you know, like I'm still the one who like is like the wife, and you're not going to kind of leave me for her or like whatever, and this is just, you know, some like fun dalliance that you're having like outside of a marriage, right? And so it's weird that this is kind of socially accepted, but then like as soon as kind of like everyone knows about it or whatever, like everyone's like, oh my god. But yeah, anyway, back to what you were saying. Like so there's this culture where like men are like allowed to cheat and women aren't, and so
Yeah.
you know, so like how did that kind of influence you know, like your expression of like wanting to be polyamorous, and particularly kind of the queerness aspect of it as well? I assume that was also like not you know, socially
not
accepted.
allowed,
yeah,
not liked. All of the men that I grew up with who were adults, so like, you know, uncles, whatever, family friends, whatever, almost all of them had a side girlfriend. Like, and it's one of those like best kept / worst kept secrets sort of situations. So you could have a situation like, I have a friend, his grandfather, you know, didn't have a lot of money, but his grandfather actually was also dating the neighbor. And so he had kids with the neighbor as well as with his wife. And so it was one of those things where it's like everyone kind of knows, like we kind of know this is happening, but we don't talk about it. Like we don't talk about the fact that, you know, your husband's kids all play together and just think they're friends and not that they're all related. And then there's this whole idea of jackets. So jackets are, a woman gives a man a jacket when she says a child is his and it is not his. So that is the top fear of women, you know, being able to have sex with multiple men. They're going to give me a jacket. They're going to pretend this child is mine when the child is not mine. Not factoring into all the other issues that come into that, which is, you know, it could have been yours. I was also sleeping with you. There's a lot of layers and politics to the situation, I will say. But so I grew up aware of all of those things. If we want to take it super close to home, my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, is not my grandfather's wife. She's his girlfriend.
Right.
And my grandfather was still married. And he had children with his wife, children with my grandmother. She had children from a previous relationship, like, you know, so this was just standard. Like, I mean, I grew up knowing that my grandmother would have my grandfather over to her house for like lunch. He would come over for dinner. He would stay and watch the news. They would go to sleep, and he would not be here in the morning. Like he would leave at like 11 p.m. to go home to his wife. Like that was just normal. Wow. So for me, polyamory just makes more sense than all of that subterfuge. Yeah. And so even like growing up and like exploring connections with men and like dating men, and people are talking about cheating and whatever, like I can tell you one of my boyfriends cheated on me. And I say cheated because he violated the arrangement, but he violated the arrangement the first time. Once I knew this was who he was, I had already made peace with that. I was like, okay, I'm good. Wow. You're still you're still my boyfriend. Yeah. But I already know you're sleeping with other people. And the only rule, of course, was to keep up the appearances. Like, yes, you're sleeping with other people, but I'm the only one who's your girlfriend. So, yeah, that's what you kind of get used to doing. Yeah. And then realizing that, wow, this is fucked up. How come they get to sleep with other people and I don't? That's lame.
You're the one with the dream since you were like 6 of having a husband and a wife. You're like, I want to live that dream, right? Yeah.
Why aren't I living the dream? And so being bisexual, it was way easier. People are like, oh, well, guys are like, oh, well, if you don't sleep with men, it's okay. You can sleep with other women. And I'm like, sign me up, bitch. It's exactly what I wanted. I don't give a shit about other dick. I only need one. Give me my 3 girlfriends, please. Harem me. Thank you very much. But again, of course, being queer is not, at the time, not publicly socially accepted. Yeah. So it was more or less like a lot of the girls either had girlfriends like secretly, like just best friends. Yeah, like my sister, she's like my bestie. Like we play those games still to this day with some people. Yeah, and then others, they were like openly queer, like you couldn't hide that. Like they're, what do they call them, like gold star lesbians, never been with a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I knew
problematic
like
term, but yeah,
well.
that is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they call it. I've heard like in the streets. So it's like that. And so I would have like those secret girlfriends who like have boyfriends, but like can't tell the boyfriends they're into women. And so like they would like flirt with me and like talk to me. And there's a running joke in my high school and like early college years that I could turn anyone Jhen sexual. So they may not be into women, but for some reason they're into me. Oh. Or they might be lying about being into, but they're into me. And so it was kind of like, well, I was the anomaly, right? I just happened to be so amazing. I mean, I am, but I just happened to be so amazing that out of all the women in the world, Lisa Left Eye Lopez, Halle Berry, I am the one that they want. And of course, a lot of men take advantage of that because they're kind of like, oh, well, Jhen's hot. Like, let's have a threesome with Jhen. And so that was very much like a huge part of the lifestyle. People are like, oh, well, but you're bisexual. Like you're into this freaky shit. Like, why don't you just want to have a threesome with me? Like, ew, you're not cute. That's why.
Yeah. So you were just, wait, how old were you at this point in time? Like, were you in school?
Yeah. So when I started exploring sexual connections with people, like, I mean, and let's be very specific. When I started having penis in vagina sex, I was 17.
Okay, yeah.
I was, exploring sex with women before that. It's different.
Okay. Yeah.
So, because it's like, it doesn't count because it's a woman. Yeah. Sure. So there was fingering, there was all that stuff going on a little bit younger than that. But I did not have like sexual intercourse with a man until I was 17. Right. And so after that is when it was kind of like, oh, and it's awkward because my friends at the time were like very religious. And so once I had sex, it was like, oh, scarlet letter. Like all the guys wanted to use me to get experience, not necessarily sex, like to have sex with me, but like they were like, oh, well, Jhen's had sex before, so like we can just make out and it's fine. Like she doesn't have feelings. She's given herself over to the devil or whatever. Like she's tempting us to do these things by virtue of having a vagina and having used it once with another man.
And what was that like? I mean, what was that like for you, being kind of like that person where everyone was just like using you for sex?
Good time, but not a serious time. Yeah. I mean, did not help that I have been content warning, trigger warning, suffering from, eating disorder issues and like body image issues. And there was a lot of stuff going on in my life from childhood up until, I mean, those things never really go away if we're being super honest, right? There's always that kind of little part in your brain that will regress to a certain point if you were triggered a certain way. So at that time, it was very weird, very hurtful. And because for some of those people, it's like, I thought we were actually friends. And so when you express an interest in me to a certain point, it's like, cool. All right, well then I'm interested as well. I did have a crush on you. So let's try to do this thing. And then it was like, oh no, this was just a thing. Like no one can ever know about this. And it was like, you suck. So I am not the problem here. You are. And it took like a couple of people, but it also led to me cutting off that entire group of people, right? Because I was like, there's something wrong with you guys. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm being honest about myself. I'm being who I am. And there's something wrong with you.
I'm glad you had the foresight to think that at the time, because I think some people really just internalize it and they're like, maybe like I'm the problem. I should be kept a secret. I'm worthless. Or no.
But I just didn't want a serious, like, I wasn't looking for like my future husband. And of course, when you're in college, what are you doing if not looking for your husband? How dare you go to college to not look for a man? Listen, one of my family members told me that. She was just like, what are you doing wasting your time? You're going, where are the men? And I was like, what men? girl, like, what are you talking about? She's like, you should be taking this time to look for a husband. I was like, a husband?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with one of those? I mean, of course, I was also delusional because I did think that I'd be married with a child by 25, because at 19, 25 seems super old for some reason. Like, you're just like, that's just so far away. I graduated college at 20. So I graduated at 20. And at that point, I had already been like, okay, I've had a couple of threesomes. I've dated women, I've dated men. You know, I'm very firmly in this bisexual camp, but I don't think I'm quite looking for the same things that everyone else is looking for. There's something not clicking with me about how this is going. So time passes. I date another man. We try monogamy for a while. I become miserable, very miserable, very unhappy. And this is after it took him like 6+ months for me to even get for even him to even get me to call him my boyfriend. I was just like pretending he was just some dude. We're friends. Like, he's just some dude I happen to sleep with who's my friend. Like, he's not like my boyfriend or anything. Then I was like, I guess I have feelings for you. I guess you could be my boyfriend now.
Yeah, like, I guess.
I guess.
Yeah.
And then I got unhappy. And then he was like, why are you unhappy? And I was like, I just miss pussy.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was like, why didn't you just say that? You were bisexual when we started talking. Like, you can date women. And I was like, really? Yeah, you can date women. That's totally fine. And that really, I mean, that was it.
Okay.
You could never hold me back again. The only reason I even tried monogamy with him was because he and I had talked about that future, you know, the marriage, the kids, the all the things, what you're supposed to want when you're in your early 20s dating men. And I thought that we could have had that future. So I was like, well, you can be bi. You just can't always be fucking bitches if you want that future. And then he was like, girl, he was like, don't hold that part of yourself back. There are going to be, you know, boundaries, of course, like some people that he'd be uncomfortable with me sleeping with, like an ex-girlfriend. He's kind of like, not excited about you sleeping with an ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
And I was like, that makes sense. I guess, you know, I'm not going to leave you for her because I don't leave people. I don't cheat. I don't violate those sorts of things. But that's my one thing, by the way. I don't cheat. I've never cheated on anyone ever because I've seen what cheating does to the relationships around me. I would rather just tell you, I'm feeling this person. Something's happening. Something's whatever. And I will keep you updated. Or I think I want to fuck this person. We need to talk about what that means. Yeah. But I'm not going to go behind your back and do the thing.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. Like, everyone thinks that polyamorous people have a history of cheating, right? And like, that isn't, you know, people like you know, you've never cheated on it. You've always been very honest about your attraction to multiple people, and you haven't kind of made a secret of that, right?
That's the point. So like, I was doing the polyamory thing before I even had the word for it. Like, it was just, I was already doing it. And so when that partner and I broke up, I was kind of like, great, let's just be single for a while. We'll casually date. We'll kind of step more into being polyamorous, because at that point it's like, you know, I'm a bisexual person presenting in a monogamous cishet relationship. So once that was over, it was like, great, I can just be myself. I don't have to live with these expectations. I moved out of Jamaica, so I moved to the US at that point. But I was still dating people in Jamaica because you date what's comfortable to you. Yeah. So I was still engaging. My polycule, part of it was in Jamaica, part of it was in the US. I dated a couple. They were in Jamaica separately and together. It's just, there was a lot of stuff that was going on. And I can say that dating in Jamaica, complicated on the best day. Okay. Just in general, like, due to, I mean, I guess it's the same everywhere, but as an immigrant to the US, I don't have the same experience that a lot of African Americans would potentially have here. Yeah. So it's like, in Jamaica, we have that whole religious aspect to it where, you know, and then the whole anti-gay aspect to it and what that looks like. And then the husbands are supposed to have side girlfriends, but the wives can't have anyone else. And what does that look like? And so you do end up being in the closet in a way. There's not a lot of opportunities to live openly polyamorously on the island. There are some people who do, but obviously a lot of stigma that comes with that, right? Just like how being LGBTQ plus in Jamaica does come with stigmas as well. We do have, you know, a pride group. We do have, J Flag. We do have a lot of great things like that. But it doesn't mean that there is not that stigma that's attached to it. But that mostly comes from religion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
that religion and
yeah.
that, Britain used to be, well, I mean, we're still technically a colony of Britain, keeping it honest. The Queen's our head of state.
Hong Kong, same.
Colonialism, my favorite.
Yeah.
And so taking that into account, it's like a lot of our rules and our laws are very much based in homophobia and in patriarchy, and to benefit our colonial overlords, so to speak. That it is what the current will of the people is. So like, for example, buggery is illegal. We have a buggery law, which is just anal sex.
Like regardless of gender?
Yeah. Buggery is illegal. Buggery is illegal. It is more often applied to homosexual situations, obviously, because you got to catch those gays. A part of you will always be living somewhat closeted in Jamaica, unless you are completely out and proud and able to deal with what the ramifications of that are.
No, that's real. Like honestly, I'm seeing so many parallels between like your life in Jamaica and like mine in Hong Kong. Like granted, like I didn't really start exploring my sexuality or even like sex like at all like until I was in the UK, like, and I moved to the UK when I was 16. So in that way, me like my experiences like in school and that kind of thing and like early sexuality like are completely different from yours, because I had no exploration of that, and so I didn't know I was queer really until I was like 18. I kind of wanted to touch on like what you said about like just like you were fine with like your partner like sleeping with other people and stuff, like as long as you like you were still kind of recognized as like the girlfriend, right? And like this idea of keeping up appearances, like as you said, and I very much relate to that as well. Like I mean, what I said, everything about like the little third kind of culture like in China, and and I think also just generally with other stuff, like I think in Asia, like people are very, very much concerned with keeping up appearances and looking like a certain type of way, a certain type of family, a certain type of life. And then they just don't talk about like, the elephant in the room. Like there's a lot of elephants in the room constantly. I'm not just talking about relationships. I'm talking about just like, your job, like your personal life, like your mental health, like all that is like brushed under the carpet. And then you're just like, yeah, but like we're fine, we're happy, we're wealthy, we're comfortable, and it's like everyone's like having a midlife crisis. It's like so it's so interesting that like you've also kind of had that experience, right? And you also talked about how because you grew up in Jamaica and then kind of moving to the US, and you had like a different experience from like like African Americans, right? Whereas for me, like I also like I grew up in Hong Kong for most of my life. Like I moved to the UK when I was 16, and I have like a vastly different experience from like the Chinese people who had grown up in the UK. And like I think like the difference, the main difference between me and like the kind of Asians that I came across, and I just mean generally, I don't mean like in the polyamorous community, is that like they have like a lot more internalized racism than I do. Which obviously makes sense, right? Because like I grew up in a majority Asian country. I always had like my race and my culture like validated. I didn't kind of feel insecure about it. I wasn't like bullied like for it. Whereas like if you're kind of in like a white majority country, then you're constantly like you see your culture being made fun of and misunderstood and you misrepresented, and that's like a whole that fucks with you, right?
The racism hits different.
The racism does hit different, yeah. Like and like obviously people have been racist to me in the UK, but it's not been like a constant thing to the point where like I've internalized. It's always been more, I've always treated it as more of the exception than the norm. And so but yeah, like I'm kind of very like, it sounds bad when I say this, but like I feel that I have the privilege of being like secure in my ethnic identity in a way that like diaspora Asians are like would kind of struggle to get to the same point. And that's kind of because like I kind of lived I like because of my lived experience, right? And
it's very true though.
Yeah, and this kind of brings up for me like, because so my parents like had this dream for me like growing up, where like they were like, oh, we want you to marry like another like nice Chinese man, ideally a doctor or an engineer.
I know that life.
Yeah, like, yeah, you know, marrying someone of the same race, right? And like they have, you know, high flying job, whatever, and then, you know, like have 2.5 kids or like whatever, right? Like that whole dream. And you know, so then like when I moved to the UK and I started dating, and like my first boyfriend was white, they were like, but then I broke up with that boyfriend. He cheated on me. And my second boyfriend was Chinese. His parents were actually from Hong Kong, but like he grew up in the UK, and like his parents had a fish and chip shop in North London. And like honestly, that was a really weird experience for me, because like the internalized racism that I mentioned, like I'm pretty sure like my boyfriend at the time, like he was like the only Asian kid like in his entire kind of like neighborhood like back then. And I think that fucked with him in a way that meant that honestly, like I can confidently say he was more racist to me than all of my white boyfriends combined. Because of like this internalized hatred that he had of like, you know, himself, his own race, and that kind of thing. You know, he said things to me like, you know, you're so civilized for a Chinese girl, being Chinese himself, right? And you know, that stuff like that ran like so deep. And then you know, he'd always kind of make like you know, I don't know how long I tolerated this, but we were only together for like a year and a half. But like he,
you know, you said only a year and a half, only. Only.
Okay, that stuff came out in the last like 4 months, I would say. But still, you know, but like he would make like, you know, weird remarks about like my parents and kind of like China in general. And then, you know, it was such a cognitive dissonance, because I was like, yeah, like, you know, we're Chinese, we get each other, you know, we speak in Chinese to each other at school to like, you know, just to like piss off the white kids because they don't understand what we're saying. We're speaking the secret code, right? We get each other. And then he says stuff like this, right? And so it was such a weird experience. And then, you know, and my parents picked up on this as well. Like my parents were like, you know, like we thought like he was cool because he's Chinese, right? You know, we were so happy to welcome him to the fold, but like he's like weirdly racist towards us. Yeah. And so I was like, yeah. And so like after I ended that relationship, my mom was like, you know what, like date whatever race you want. Because my mom was like, like she was, I thought, you know, you'd get along with kind of like, you know, British born Chinese people, but you know, she was like, I completely did not consider there was like this element of internalized racism, like, and you have very fundamentally different life experiences in that way. And so yeah, so since then, you know, like I've dated, you know, a mix of like races, right? But like my mom hasn't kind of cared about it as much, and kind of not held on to the like, you must kind of date another Asian person. But yeah, I'm curious to kind of hear like what you and kind of your family origin kind of had to say about like, you know, dating white people versus kind of dating like people of your own race or dating other races even.
Yeah, I mean, my mom doesn't care. She's just kind of like, girl, if you happy, like whatever. I mean, she had to deal with a child who had a lot of like emotional issues, and also happened to be bisexual, and also happened to be polyamorous. Like she there's enough on her plate to sort out like mentally with me. She's like, okay. Like I think I came out to her as polyamorous last. So she figured out all the other stuff like about my trauma, needing therapy, you know, all those other things came out first.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, by the way, you know that person that you think who was my best friend? No, we were fucking. I was bi. I'm gay. I'm la gay mama. And I mean, and I only told her that because I was dating one of her coworkers. Unintentionally, right? I was dating, I knew this person separately, and I didn't realize they were coworkers until after I introduced my mom to the person. Right. Because they had more than one job. You know, why would I keep track of that? I was like 18, 19. Like, why would I keep track of things like that? I don't know. And so coming out to her as polyamorous was a more recent thing. I mean, it wasn't a secret. There was that married couple who were so close to me, who every time I came home to Jamaica to visit, they would come to my house within hours of me landing. And we'd be locked in my room for hours. And so it just kind of came out. I was like, you know that I'm dating both of them, right? She was like, oh. Like, I thought you were just, she said, I suspected something was going on between you and her. And I was wondering if he knew about it, but this makes sense. This makes more sense than what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, great. Cheers. Go us. But so she's never cared about the ethnicity of anyone that I've dated, like no racial issues, whatever. My dad has an idea about what he wants from my life. It involves being married to a rich white man. And it also involves the rich white man financially supporting my entire family on my father's side.
Oh, wow.
So it's not so much the fact that the guy is white, more than it is that he has money. I think if I found a rich Asian man, he would be just as okay with it. I think he wants me to have a rich white man because he thinks white men are stupid. I think that's really what it is. I think he thinks it would be so much easier to finesse a white man to take care of my entire family because they're not that smart, as opposed to it being a genuine, color issue. Because
so this wasn't like a white worshipping issue.
Yeah, like, no, this was more of like they're stupid and they have money. We should take their money. But the only way we're going to get it is if you marry him.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
So, right. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess.
I see that
unfortunately.
I see that in places like Asia as well, like where it's like find like a white dude and then just take his money.
But like I have standards. So it's a bit awkward, right? When you have standards and you're trying to finesse some random, supposedly stupid white man out of his money, it gets a bit weird. Not that it's ever been my goal, but it just sounds like a lot of work to me, Dad. I have to pretend to like this dude. I have to voluntarily spend time with him. I have a good friend who I love. I hate the sound of his voice. I love him as a person, but I can't talk to him on the phone. And if I have to sit down in front of him and have him speak to me, I want to leave. And it's not because I don't care about him. He's my genuine friend, but his voice, right? So if I don't want to be around someone that I actually care about, then how am I supposed to be around a stranger?
It would just be work. Yeah.
Money is not enough.
Yeah.
Like he would have to compensate me severely for this time. So it's never really been an issue. I've dated mostly Black people. I'll be honest about that. Like I've dated mostly Black people, mostly Jamaicans, but that's also just because of cultural issues.
Okay.
And let me expand on this as nicely as possible.
Okay.
So when I moved to the US,
there
were a lot of little digs made to me by African Americans about how obviously I have to escape the horrible lifestyle that I live in the islands. And that's why I came to the US, which is not even remotely truth as to why I came, but it's those little things that they constantly make you feel like you're inferior to them just because you came to the US. I'm like, they're going to kill both of us the same, right? Like, they're not going to stop me and be like, oh, sorry, you're not an American Black, you're like a Jamaican Black. Sorry, you can get a pass from the racism. Like, they're not going to do that.
Yeah. Like, they see you the same. Yeah.
They see the color of my skin is the same. And so it's like those constant little digs like that, those little comments, those little nonstop. And there are obviously a lot of people I don't have those issues with, right? But then there are some people where it's like, and it's usually coming from the men, obviously. Like they have this idea that they are saving me. And I don't know if it's the 90-day fiance of it all, where they just assume that I'm like, dude, you don't even have enough money to maintain me. I don't have enough money to maintain me. Like I have champagne taste and a sparkling water budget. Like you're trying to feed me McDonald's. We are not the same right now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of awkwardness around that. And then I've been on 2 dates with white men. I have a hard no against white women, but that's just based on a lot of political things.
Okay.
I've tried with white men, and one of them was going really well. But at the time I was an international flight attendant, he hated my job. And so he was like, yeah, I can't do this whole thing where you're gone for 8 days at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
I was like, 8 days is not that long. Like, but again, I've been doing this job for several years. So my idea of like time and like how I schedule my time was very different. Like he was the kind of person who was like, if you're not in my face all the time, I can't do this.
Oh, wow.
And I'm the kind of person where, listen, I would rather you leave me alone. If we live in the same house, we need to have separate bedrooms and separate bathrooms. Like I need to be able to avoid you if I so desire.
Yeah, you want your own kind of personal space, right? Yeah,
exactly. And so that also kind of helped me to narrow down how I view my romantic relationships, right? Because I mean, polyamory is more than just about sex. It's more than just about the romantic side of things, about how I'm going to structure the people that I care about, my intimate relationships. Not all of them have to be sexual. Some of them can just be what they are.
Yeah.
And it helped me kind of realize a lot about what I don't want. And I don't want kitchen table poly. That is not ideal to me.
Okay.
I was like, I very much am a solo polyamorous person. I want to live alone. If we are cohabitating, it is for financial reasons, not because I actively want you in my space.
Yeah.
Like I've had roommates weren't enough. Like we could be married, but we're roommates. Okay. We got separate spaces, we got separate times, we got schedules, we got the whole thing. And exploring dating racially was very odd. Okay. Like I remember on dating apps, men would be like, "Oh yeah, this dude says, oh my friends tell me I have jungle fever," and I was like, "Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, do you know how racist that is?" Well, my Black friend says it all the time. Are you Black? Are you Black? Did something happen to your picture? Do you look a little pale? Yeah. And then the other ones were just like, "Oh, I hope you're not one of those Black Lives Matter bitches."
Oh my God.
And I was like, I lived in Florida. So, you know,
yeah,
it's very white men holding large fishes and, you know, blue lives matter.
Oh God.
And all lives matter. So I had a mixed bag. So I had some great, that one dude, if he could have handled my 5-minute schedule, it could have worked out a bit longer. He was also a redhead. I have a weakness for redheads, so that might have been what it was. But you know, I've had sex with white men. I've engaged with them in different ways. I have white friends. Like I have intimate friendships with white people. But there's always this like thing that happens when you're around large groups of them. Yeah. And there you can see how they treat you. Things just start looking differently. I went out with one of my good friends. She's white, blonde, beautiful woman. We went to a nightclub. Like a dude had invited her and a friend, and I'm her friend. And he refused to look at me. He refused to speak directly to me. And so it was one of those things where he was only looking at her, and then he'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to the bar. You know, what do you want to drink?" And so she would have to deliberately turn to me and be like, "Are you thirsty? Do you want something to drink? Okay, my friend and I will have XYZ ABC."
Wow.
Like that's how they treated you. Like they treated you like you were invisible, like you were not even there.
Wow. Like I've never kind of encountered that kind of experience. Like, you know, like if people ignored me, it wasn't on like the basis of my race. Like for full disclosure, right? So I attended Oxford University. And you know, Oxford University, there is like a type of like rich white boy there where like they only associate with other rich white boys. Or rather, it's not so much about race, it's more about like wealth at that point. But you know, if you're in the aristocracy in the UK, like you're probably white. And like I've had experiences where like someone would like ignore me until like that someone else told them that I went to a certain private school, and then they'd be like, "Oh," and they suddenly like take interest in me because I went to the right school, you know. But I've never kind of like you know what you described, that's horrible, that's dehumanizing, you know. But yeah, so you talked about kind of mostly dating like other kind of like Caribbeans and that kind of thing. And so I confess I don't know a huge amount about this, but like based on kind of what conversations I've had with other like Black polyamorous people, so such as Evita Sawyers or Marjani Lane, like what do you think of you know, people in the Black polyamorous community who like have this boundary where like they won't date someone who has a white partner, so like they won't tolerate kind of any like white people like in the polycule, like particularly the practice kitchen table poly, like, you know, what do you think about that?
I mean, that's their personal choice, right? As long as they're not infringing that choice on someone else. If they say to this person, "Hey, I am not cool having white people in the polycule. If you have a white partner, I'm going to peace out. I'm not asking you to change your situation. I'm letting you know my boundary. I'm going to remove myself from that situation," right? If they're doing it in a way like that, where they're making a decision for themselves to remove themselves because they don't want to have to deal with that, that's fine. We can talk about all the horrors that have happened. Like that casual story I told you, that's just casual everyday racism. Like that's not accounting in the family members who have told one of my good friends, she's married to a white man in Europe, and they called her a Negro. And like they make these little the comments, and they're like, oh, well, isn't it like a bad thing to call you like, you know? Like she's like, black? I am black. Like, and so there's a lot of racism that comes even unintentionally in these situations. Like they may not think they're doing the thing, but they are doing the thing because white is the default, especially in the US. So I can understand people not wanting to have white people in the polycule. If it was kitchen table, I probably wouldn't do it either. I mean, not that I want kitchen table period, but if that was the thing, like this person has to be heavily vetted by me. Like there is no way that I would be comfortable having a white person that close to me without having done a full vet on them. If that's the kind of relationship you want us to have. And that means like, I got to know who am I going to be around with them, not just them personally, but their family, their friends. Because if we're doing kitchen table, that means that there are all these people that they're connected to that are going to be a part of my life.
Okay.
So I would need to know a lot of things like that before I'm comfortable with that. If I have done the vetting and I've decided it's okay, I'm comfortable with this, that's fine. It's not a judgment on my partner or their partner. It is something that I have to live with. Like I have to be okay with this. And I think the burden always seems to be on the Black woman to get along. You rarely ever hear Black men saying they don't want white people in the polycule. It's because the Black men don't experience racism the same way as white women do in these polyamorous situations. And this is a very general statement. This is not a, this particular Black person does this. I have tended to notice that the majority of people who gravitate towards whiteness in a certain way are Black men. They tend to have a lot of white female partners. They tend to take this proximity to whiteness to elevate their status in certain situations, because of course in business, like let's talk about that. Like in the American society, proximity to whiteness is king. Like you are an acceptable, you're an quote unquote acceptable Black if you have a white partner. Like a lot of white women, even on social media, actually this week, I've been getting some racist abuse on one of my other pages. And they're like, that's why all of your Black men keep running to us white girls, because of you raggedy, you people are like shit. This. Like, this is the kind of comments that we get on our posts. So for me, anyone who's uncomfortable interacting with whiteness in that way, especially romantically, if you don't have to, I get it. Because the onus is always on the Black woman to get along. And it's never on the white man, on the Black man to fully vet his white partner to make sure they're safe to be around other people.
There's like two things that I want to say in response to that, because like, on this kind of whole debate, right, I think this is quite like a thorny issue in the community, because like some people agree with it and some people don't. And like my personal take is that like, like I, like obviously, like a white person is more likely to kind of like, not have like the kind of social awareness and that type of shit, right? But like, given the experience that I just told you about, where like, like my one kind of long-term like person, like partner who was a person of color, was more racist than all of my other white partners. I've like kind of based on my own experience, I've learned not to automatically assume that like just because they're white they're going to cause harm, and just because they're a person of color they're immediately safe. Because I've been so massively betrayed in that way that like I kind of see them the same. But I've never lived in America, and I know that like kind of race in America is like it's different. I think like because of the history and everything, it's going to be like different from like say like in the UK. Not to say that there isn't racism in the UK, but I think the dynamics are like a little different. And the second thing that I want to say, like in terms like calling back to kind of what you said about like Black men and proximity to whiteness. Obviously, I have no kind of personal experience to speak of regarding this, but this reminds me of do you know the YouTuber Cat Black? I know her. Black polyamorous trans woman, and recently she did like a podcast kind of call-in show, like where she was speaking about the very, very thorny issue of race play, and particularly Black people who willingly participate in race play. And she and basically like she got like a bunch of people to kind of call in with their own personal experiences with this, and basically she from all of that, like, because she's got quite a big following, big platform and whatever, kind of speaking to people, like she surmised that people who like the black people who are all right with race play are black men, and whereas like black women are not okay with it. And so that was like that, that, what you said kind of reminded me of that, kind of how I think like being a man, you still have like some amount of kind of male privilege in terms of like your personal safety and that kind of thing that like as a black woman you don't have. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about racism in general, yes, everyone experiences racism, but black women are the one who get shit on the most. And this is just factually true. Like, we could talk about it statistically based on numbers. You could talk about anything around this, but it always comes down to the fact that it's always the black women who have the worst experiences, even with black men, because they're like, oh, well, that's how we can't date you people. That's why we can't date people like you.
Yeah.
And my friends and I have a joke: black men are the weakest link, right? Because there's, when it comes to this, like, there's a funny TikTok. I thought it was hilarious. This black guy asking the girlfriend, like, oh, like, his white girlfriend, obviously, like, would you leave me if there is somebody who wants to date you who made more money than me? She was like, yeah, what the fuck am I going to stay with you for? They make more money. Like, why would I stay with you? And he was like, could not believe she's saying that. She's like, are you dumb? Like, you don't, someone who paid for my nails, someone to do whatever. Like, she's like, you're not doing that shit for me now. Why would I not go somewhere where it's better? And he is aghast, because for him, he feels like his existence should be enough to keep her maintained. And if it was a black woman who said that, he would have had a very different response. And I have seen very different responses, because you find that black women are the ones who are usually called gold diggers for wanting to date people of equal financial stature, or like even slightly more elevated financial stature. It's like, oh, all you bitches want to do is just do whatever. Like, this is the kind of conversation that gets had. So when you're like, oh, how much money is acceptable to spend on a date? Like, listen, just say you don't have money and go. Like, no woman is going to be messaging you and being like, oh, well, I think that we should spend $600 on this date because XYZ ABC. We're not doing that. That's not what we do. But there's this expectation that if a black woman wants different or better, that she's too big for her britches, that she doesn't understand her place.
Then I think there's also something else that I just remembered is I can't remember where I heard this from now, but I heard on a podcast somewhere where someone like talked about like the relationship between like race and gender and like the intersections of that, where like basically race is gendered and like gender is racialized. So what I mean by that is like, I feel like so this person said on the podcast, and I 100% agree with this, by the way, that certain races are assigned like gender. So like blackness is assigned with masculinity, for example, and Asianness is assigned to like femininity. So that's why you see like, like black men, they're like seen as like, the ultimate kind of like symbol of masculinity, and black women are tend to be kind of portrayed as like aggressive and too big for the britches, as you said, and kind of like and whereas like Asians, like they tend to be seen as like feminine. Asian women are like the peak of like like beauty and femininity and like demureness and submissiveness, right? And Asian men are like weak, and they're not and they're not kind of seen as like strong, and like they're just they're seen kind of like submissive again, right? So and I think that kind of plays into like like the proximity to whiteness kind of thing. Like I think like if there's kind of two groups of people that like people always talk about like being taking advantage of that, it's actually like you say kind of black men, but in my world, for Asian people, it's like Asian women. Like Asian women, there's like the stereotype that like they always have like white boyfriends. And I wonder if that's because like Asian women are seen as like kind of feminine, as is kind of aligning with their gender, and then black men are seen as masculine, again aligning with their gender, and that kind of gives them that, I don't want to say privilege, I don't think privilege is the right word, but that gives them the ability to kind of be proximal to what, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I get what you're trying to say. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that. So I used to be an international flight attendant. Like I said, I traveled to Europe a lot. I flew to Thailand a lot. And so many white European men with their Thai wives. So many. so many. Like, and
Yeah.
it is such an interesting dynamic because I would be in Denmark, and just one country, for example, I'd
Yeah.
be in Denmark, and the Black people there were all immigrants. I went to immigrants, you know, in the negative way, the way they talk about it. But if you're being honest, anyone who is not from the place is an immigrant, but they don't count white people. They don't count other white Europeans as immigrants, only, you know, the Africans who had to come over here, you know, because of their horrible conditions in their countries. And, you know, it's, God, racism has gotten so much more astronomical in Denmark, by the way. But I remember this one particular instance. I was at a club, nightclub, but not like the best neighborhood, the dodgy neighborhood. Like, we were being surprised, like a little bit dodgy, but that's where the nightclub that played the Black music was, obviously, right? So inside, it's, I know, African immigrants, white men, and very few like white women. Like, it's very much that. And there's this one white guy, he's like all over me. He's like drunk. He's like, oh yeah, like, you know, I love your skin. It's so beautiful. It's very gross when people, why don't they know it's gross? I don't understand. Very gross. Oh, you know, I love your skin, like your complexion is just really drawing to me. Like, I'd love for you to come home with me. And I was like, but what about your wife? He was like, oh, she's asleep. She'll never know. He wants to take me to the house that his wife and child live in to have sex with me in his basement.
What? That's wild.
And, right? And I was like, sir, like, do you not?
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm leaving the club, and these drunk men are also calling to me and asking me like how much I charge, because the only Black women out in the neighborhood right now are the prostitutes.
Oh wow, that's fucked. That is fucked.
So it's like there's just stuff going on. There's a lot of layers to this, right?
Yeah.
Especially like that happened to me when I was in Barcelona too. My friend was like, listen, we're going up, like, be careful when you walk in certain neighborhoods because they're going to think you're a prostitute because the Black women are the prostitutes here. Don't forget that.
Oh,
so
Jesus.
if your dress is too short, they're going to like try to like make a pass at you. Just be careful.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers that come to with like being, but of course, you know, like when you go to Asia, for example, like when you go to Thailand, when you go to whatever, they assume that these Thai women are also for sale sexually, because that is, you know, the Thai lady boy situation. And then like in certain parts of, you know, there's this assumption that if you find an Asian woman, that she must be down for sex. She must be able to prostitute herself for you, because that's what they do. That's what they do, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting. And then I think a part of what makes dating as a Black woman very interesting is the racism from other people of color. So in Jamaica, you know, we have a lot of Chinese. We have Chinese people, Indian people, like from India. This is very much part of our culture. Our motto is out of many, one people, right? That's very standard.
Yeah.
We had the indigenous people who were in Jamaica before, the white people who came. They brought slaves, Black people, and then they brought over Indian and Chinese people as indentured servants. And I do have Indian in my family. And my mother's mother is Indian. Well, my mother's mother, you know how it is. My great grandmother on my mother's side was Indian, and her parents disowned her because she married a Black man.
Wow.
She married a Black Methodist minister.
Yeah.
And I remember another person in our family circle telling me to make sure that I married. This is very standard in Jamaica to like bleach your skin. They want you to appear lighter, and people tell their daughters to like marry lighter because you want to have the nice hair.
Yeah,
you
no,
want to have pretty hair.
In Asia as well, you know, growing up, my mom would tell me like, you know, get like if I was playing in the sun, my mom would like, get out of the sun, otherwise you'll be dark and ugly.
Yeah. And so like why would darker be ugly?
Yeah,
especially because you're like when you come to the US and you realize everyone is tanning.
Yeah.
You're like, so you're telling me that I'm hideous for being Black.
I genuinely think this is like
to be Black.
I genuinely think this is more of a grass is greener situation. Like people in like, you know, with dark skin want to be lighter because then they look like exotic or, you know, different, right? And then like in like white countries, they want to look tan because then they look like traveled and again different. Like obviously there's like a racial element to this as well, but I do think like the grass is greener thing is like a big contributing factor.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we can see how it happens. And I have my friend, God bless him, like I said, his grandmother, very Indian lady, she hates me because I'm Black, and she thought that I was sleeping with her son, her grandson. Like, we can't,
Oof.
because we can't mix. We can't
Yeah.
mix like that.
Yeah.
And so that's also the hard part, where it's like, yes, I'm open to dating people, I'm open to getting to know people, I'm open to like building these connections with people, but then it's like the color of my skin is a barrier as opposed to actually knowing anything about me. So I've gotten to the point, like on dating apps, where I just list out all the things I won't tolerate first. It's like, if you're a Trump supporter, don't talk to me, I don't want to hear it. I don't care if you only voted for him one time, don't even bother, it's not worth it. Just don't. If you identify as a conservative, don't talk to me, I don't want to hear it, just don't bother. It means that we're not aligned politically or morally. I don't want to go into it. So I've just started listing all the things I don't want to tolerate, and it weeds out a lot of people. You'd be surprised. Like, if you are anti-trans rights, if you don't believe that trans women are women, don't even bother. Don't try to debate this with me. You will lose, because I will just block you. It'll be a waste of your own time. I don't want to, I'm not debating people's right to exist with you. And it's interesting, because then you tend to be left with, in certain areas, a lot of white liberal folk, because a lot of the Black people are like moderate or conservative or whatever. And then it's like, great, how do I live with this? And that was one of the hardest things to understand about polyamory in the US specifically. Because in Jamaica, once you're polyamorous, you're like, you're okay with a lot of shit. Like, you've got to be cool with a lot of shit to be polyamorous, right? Because we come from this very conservative culture. You have to be okay with a lot of different expressions. But in the US, like, realizing that people were Trump supporters, who were anti-trans rights, and also polyamorous, I was like, the math is not mathing. This is all connected. You know that, right? This alternative, quote unquote, lifestyle stuff, it's all connected. All of this together. You're just gonna. Oh, that was hard. That was really hard at first.
No, it's weird, right? Because, like, you know, you and I, like, we're both in like the Polyamorous creators chat, and we, like, you know, like, you were there when we were dissecting that article about like, you know, where this like right-wing person was kind of talking about polyamory and trying to sell polyamory, like, talk about the virtues of polyamory and benefits of polyamory to like a mostly right-wing audience. And like, we were just kind of like losing our minds over this fucking article because of the way it described, it was wild, right? And it's like, how can you take some things and not others, and kind of not understand the, you know? So
it's like, we're in it's an accordion. It's not a circle, it's an accordion. So like, all of this is attached to it. You guys know that, right? It's just like a slinky, where you think a slinky is one thing, but it's all these layers to the thing. It's just like that. So you can't take the parts that you want to take and leave the rest. And that applies to a lot of different things, right? It's not just about polyamory, about race, about whatever. Like, if we want to talk abolition, for example, you can't decide that you're pro-abolition, but you still want people to be locked in prison. But the two thoughts don't go together. So I think a lot of it is also like people not being able to find descriptors that work for them best. And I mean, I think we can talk about why there are too many labels in non-monogamy and polyamory and queerness and all these things. Like, there's a lot of labels, a lot of different words people don't understand, especially just getting into this. Like, in Jamaica, it's gay, straight, bisexual, trans. Like, and so coming to the US, where I learned about pansexual, polysexual, omnisexual, all that stuff, I was like, wait, what? What? But that was just a cultural thing. But that's just one thing I wanted to bring up as well. Like, be patient with people of color who are immigrants, who don't have the same access to verbiage and acknowledging these terms as you do. Because
I think that's
not easy for us either.
That's real. And I think I would say kind of immigrants from like, not just from like, you know, non-white countries. Like, I would say, you know, because I, like, the vast majority of my polycule are actually, like, you know, cause from university, like, they're all internationals. So one person's from Poland, and others from Austria, and others, you know, from Australia, and like, they have like kind of different cultures and verbiage and that kind of thing as well. So I wouldn't say that's kind of unique to, you know, immigrants of color. But anyway,
I can only speak from my experience. So
yeah, for sure. No, I completely get where you're coming from. Okay, so I think we're gonna have to wrap this up because IGTV only allows up to an hour. But this has
Damn
been
you, IGTV.
yeah, but like Jhen, you have a podcast, and I'm I did like an episode with you, and it's gonna come out when?
It's coming out this Wednesday, actually. So
Coming
it's
out
like
this
perfect
Wednesday.
timing.
Absolutely perfect timing. So so stay tuned, subscribe to the Monogamish pod. Like Jhen, you're doing fantastic work for the polyam community. So happy to have you on here. I'll thank you everyone for watching till the end.
Yes. See you. Bye,
Okay,
guys.
see ya. Bye.